All right. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, from your experience, what kind of dark sides do you notice in people? Or are there any specific examples that you think are kind of really common between people at work, but aren't really recognized? Or what have you found there?
So perhaps the single biggest thing that I hear from high potential individuals, and surprisingly many high potential men, is when I start working with them on teasing apart their relationship with sensitivity and intuition, how much resonance and how much excitement there is around that aspect of them being acknowledged. And so when I say sensitivity, especially in the West, we tend to equate sensitivity with weakness or being overly feminine. But in reality, sensitivity is a physiological state of being. So when I say sensitivity, what I mean is the reactivity of the nervous system. So there's a theory called the hyperbrain hyperbody theory of integration, which says that individuals with high IQs are actually more prone to both psychological and physiological illness. And the reason for this is because of their nervous system, their systemic sensitivity. So they have these nervous systems that are noticing and perceiving, and they're connecting dots, and they're noticing trends, and they're creating patterns, and they're coming as a result of this awareness, they're coming to insights that other people miss, or they're
Mm,
connecting things in a way that are so crucial to creative and entrepreneurial work. But the downside of this systemic sensitivity is that the nervous system can become overrun. It can become raw by its state of constant noticing, which can lead to physiological and psychological illness, things like stress related illness or anxiety, depression, what have you. And so when I help individuals, and in particular men who might not be comfortable with that idea of being sensitive, but connecting that actually to their intelligence and to their creativity and to their ability to kind of skate where the puck is going, in a sense, they're able to see it as more of a gift that needs to be taken care of, right? A blessing and a burden that needs to be sort of wielded responsibly. And so what often this means is that these individuals need to really do things to take care of their hypervigilant nervous systems. So being aware of how being in crowded, noisy, busy environments may deplete them, how being around people too much may deplete them, how even things like harsh lighting or, being uncomfortable or being too cold or improper nutrition, too many stimulants, too many depressants can be very difficult on their nervous system. And so once they begin to connect these dots and start engaging in more kind of tailored self-care practices for their sensitive nervous systems, often involving, a lot of time in nature, more grounding and meditative practices, they begin to harness that sensitivity without necessarily succumbing to the depletion of it. But I do think that we need to, just in general, change the dialogue, especially in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, around what it means to be sensitive. Because right now, the paradigm is around keep calm and carry on and hustle and crush it and grind, and the desk that's littered with Red Bulls and snack bar wrappers, and that's so damaging to a system that is already sensitive. And so really shifting that paradigm and allowing for the sensitivity that is so inextricably connected to the creative personality is so important.
yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up, actually, because when you're talking about sensitivity in that way, it's funny how people think of that in either managing stress or in kind of externalizing stress too, because just, I grew up on the West Coast of Canada, and I think the West Coast of the US is similar. And it's interesting, sometimes you get this kind of positivity movement that isn't always actually effective in that. And it's very much about a veneer of positivity, or of showing your kind of, success or achievement, or in some cases, health and mental health is used as a type of achievement, but it's not, it doesn't really always look at that depth. of, it's okay to be experiencing that sensitivity, because sometimes sensitivity is just picking up on useful information or picking up on different stimuli, or, understanding different parts of the world. So do you think there's a dark side to that positivity too that we can look at, and or different ways that we understand it?
Oh, there's absolutely a dark side to positivity, and that's, I mean, it's such a truism that it now has its own term, toxic
Mm.
positivity,
Yeah,
right?
I love
So
that word.
yeah, and toxic positivity is so, I mean, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in particular, is so rampant, and very, very harmful when internalized, and it results in this culture that you have to be okay all the time, and you have to just put on sort of grin and bear it. And um, the more that we sort of adopt this impression management strategy to always be positive, to always be fine, to always be succeeding and thriving, the more and more we distance ourselves from that fundamental state of self-awareness that we need in order to remain healthy, remain balanced, and really be driving towards creations that are authentic, and
Mhm.
that are fulfilling. But I think that toxic positivity is also very correlated with the really the reigning paradigm of coaching, which is strengths based. So strengths
Mhm.
based coaching can be extraordinarily benevolent and helpful and informative, but when you look at strengths to the exclusion of examining shadows, you can end up actually leaning too into your strengths, your light side. So then you end up overusing your strengths. You end up avoiding the shadow. You end up overlooking toxic dynamics in a workplace. You end up fluffing egos so much that the individual isn't really also being reflective, self-reflective on their areas of growth potential, or potentially their weaknesses. And so when it comes to self-development or self-help, or however you want to frame it, that toxic positivity, only looking at our light side, living in the kind of rainbows and kombucha side of self-help, can be extremely I mean, not harmful, and I think really a hindrance to psychological and spiritual maturity and growth as well.
Yeah, interesting. I actually like that you've used the term maturity there, because I think that's an interesting part of it, is understanding that balance of both the dark and the light side of kind of stress and joy, or difficulty and challenge, and how they often merge. Like, you need to find that sweet spot somewhere in the middle. Like, it's great to be able to find the strengths and things, but also look at the weaknesses, but also find where they intersect, because that's often where development happens, right?
And really just coming to see ourselves as whole people, right?
Mhm.
It's the Carl Jung ism, I must have a dark side too if I am to be whole. And when we run around only shining a light on our light, pun intended, we really cut ourselves off from the richness of being, and really the shadow is where our growth potential exists. And so we just keep ourselves stuck in kind of this childish stage of maturity and development, and there's just so much more to be discovered if we're willing to do the dirty work.